and not realizing that this body is deteriorating, but the spiritual man should be growing day by day. Received another phone call a few months after that from a hometown friend in Clairton. Even though I go to church in Clairton, I'm not always in Clairton. And this guy that I received a phone call about, his name is Kenny Braswell. The name may not mean much to you right now, but at one time, Kenny Braswell was the best football player on the planet, in my opinion. He played middle linebacker for the West Virginia Mountaineers at 195 pounds and started for 3 years in Division I football, and he was a monster at best. When I received the call from my other friend, they said, Truck, you need to call Braz and check on him. He just had a massive heart attack. And when I heard it, it brought me back to memories when I had my own heart attack. I called Braz a few days later, and we began to talk and reminisce and thank God that if it had not been for him who was on our side, where would we be? Kenny Braswell, not saved real good at the time, but had a life-changing experience. Braswell began to tell me that when he had his heart attack, because he lived in a bad neighborhood in Penn Hills, that the paramedics didn't even want to come into his house. And he was trying to struggle and tell them that I can't breathe, I can't come outside to you. You got to come in and get me. And finally they came and got him, and it was almost too late. By the time they rushed him to the hospital, he had died in the truck. But I want to let you know that God gave man the sense to know how to revive man when man needs to be revived. They took him and put him on the table and put the paddles of life on his chest. They had to shock him 3 times, and he came back to life. Sometimes you need to be revived and get a new zeal in your life. See, revival is not about you coming to see who's preaching or to see who's singing. Revival means you need to get back to where you once were when you first met God. I remember when I first met God. I remember everything was new in my life. I was happy when I should have been sad. I had joy when I should have had my head down, because it wasn't about my physical condition where I existed in, because my spiritual condition was intact. In the text here, you see Jesus had just given instruction to his 12 disciples, and he was about to go and preach into the cities, because it was time for him to promote this thing called the gospel. Now, the Bible will tell you in the Old Testament, before he came, there was a forerunner, somebody to come and pave the way. And if you know anything about paving the way, it takes a lot of work, brother. The first person who has to come and get things started is going to take a lot of ridicule. They're going to take a lot of stuff, because people don't like change. And God called John the Baptist because John was the right man for the job. When Jesus talked about John, he said, John ain't like these other folk. He ain't coming to you dressed in soft clothes. He's dressed in mohair, and he wearing a leather belt. He eats wine. He eats honey and he eats off of the land. He's not trying to get your attention through how he looks. He's trying to preach and teach a word that will change your life. He's the forerunner, and he's coming to prepare the way for the coming Messiah. And if you know about the Messiah, in the Greek it's called the Christos, which means the anointed one. In Hebrew, it is the Messiah. But the people were waiting on the Messiah because it had been testified that when the Messiah comes, we will no longer be in bondage. Remember, the children of Israel had been held captive for 70 years. And there was a promise way back then that there would come a Messiah who would deliver them from all of their situations. You have to understand how Israel is strategically located in the planet. Everywhere that Israel turned around, they had an enemy on every side. You don't know how it is to always turn to your left and to your right, and you got an enemy on each side. Sometimes you just get tired of being tired. John the Baptist had done his part, but he still wasn't finished. Herod Antipas had him incarcerated because he had become a threat to his kingdom. Anytime you preaching the good news with boldness like John the Baptist was and not flinching, you become a threat to the powers that be. So they incarcerated him. So while John was in prison and he heard about this man called Jesus preaching and teaching, he sent 2 of his disciples out and told them, go and ask him, is he the one we are looking for, or should we look for another? I don't know what you're looking for today. Some of us have thinking that something different's going to come around the corner and change our lives. But God already sent his only begotten son, and he already died for us. He's already gave us the ability to be endowed with power. But we have to learn how to do one thing. We have to obey what God is saying. I'm finding out that obedience is truly better than any sacrifice than you can make. Because in order for you to obey God, you've got to sacrifice some things that you love and do not belong in the kingdom of heaven. The text will also reveal that Jesus said that among you all, there ain't none like John the Baptist. Let's see what the text is saying. Jesus answered and said unto them, go and show John again those things which ye do hear and see. The blind receive their sight. The lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. I learned a small lesson in my affliction. God had to show me something about the man who was taking care of my physical condition. He said, imagine if he didn't take the time to study, to be proficient in his art of going up through your groin area all the way up into your heart, to making sure that he didn't make a mistake. How about if he was haphazard, as some of my Christians are, who have an antidote for the blind, who have the power to give people the ability